The massive dragon lowered its head and spoke for the first time in history to a human, shocking an entire civilization and forever changing the relationship between two intelligent species that had evolved on the same planet. Its ancient voice rumbled like distant thunder in a storm. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick "Hi" in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Our tale begins in the northern mountains, where dragons had lived in isolation for millennia, watching human civilization grow from afar, and where a small human settlement recently established at the mountain's base was about to witness something unprecedented. Thorn Valley was the newest human outpost in the expanding territory of the Eastern Commonwealth. Nestled at the base of the Draken Mountains, it was primarily a research settlement established to study the region's unique flora and ecosystem. The Commonwealth had carefully selected the 150 settlers, scientists, support staff, and their families, ensuring they understood the risks of living in dragon territory. While dragon sightings were rare, their existence was an established fact, though no human had ever reported direct communication with the creatures in all of recorded history. Dr. Eliza Morgan gazed up at the swirling clouds around the mountain peaks as she bounced her 10-month-old daughter Lily in her arms. As the settlement's lead biologist, she had spent months documenting new plant species, but the dragons remained elusive. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley as Eliza walked the perimeter of the settlement, pointing out various plants to Lily, who babbled happily in response. "That's right, sweetie. That's Heather," Eliza said, as Lily reached out toward a patch of purple flowers. The baby's laughter echoed in the quiet valley, a sound of pure innocence and joy. Unknown to them, high above on a rocky ledge, ancient eyes watched the human mother and child with curious interest. Kelder, elder of the mountain dragons, had lived for over 900 years. He had witnessed the rise and fall of human kingdoms, their wars, their triumphs, and their slow expansion toward dragon territories. Unlike the younger dragons who viewed humans with outright suspicion or hostility, Kelder held a more nuanced perspective, one of cautious observation. Dragons had their own complex society, language, and traditions. Their intelligence matched or exceeded that of humans, but they had deliberately chosen isolation after the ancient wars that had nearly destroyed both species. The Dragon's Council had decreed centuries ago that no dragon would ever communicate directly with humans. Observation was permitted, but interaction was forbidden. This decree had preserved peace, if not understanding, between the species. Kelder shifted his massive form, scales glistening like burnished copper in the fading sunlight. His movement dislodged a small shower of rocks that clattered down the mountainside. Below, Eliza looked up sharply at the sound. "Probably just a mountain goat," she murmured to herself, but instinctively held Lily closer. The settlement's perimeter wasn't far, but something made her pause. She felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the primordial feeling of being watched. High above, Kelder remained motionless, his scales allowing him to blend almost perfectly with the reddish-brown mountain rock. He should leave, he knew. The council would not approve of him venturing so close to the human settlement, even for observation. Yet there was something about the small human child that captured his attention. Perhaps it was the innocence in her laughter, so rare and precious in a world full of calculated intentions. The wind shifted suddenly, bringing with it the scent of an approaching storm. Kelder's keen senses detected the electrical charge in the air long before any human instruments could. This would not be an ordinary mountain storm, but something far more dangerous. The dragon's ancient knowledge of the mountain's weather patterns told him that the humans below had perhaps an hour before a devastating deluge would sweep down the valley, bringing with it the risk of flash floods and landslides. Dragons did not interfere in human affairs. This had been their way for centuries. Yet as Kelder watched the mother and child begin their leisurely walk back toward the settlement, something stirred within him, a sense of responsibility that transcended species divisions. Back in the settlement, Chief Security Officer Marcus Reed was reviewing the weather monitoring equipment with growing concern. The barometric pressure was dropping rapidly, and satellite imagery showed a storm system forming with unusual speed. "How long do we have?" he asked the meteorologist on duty. "Hard to say with these mountain systems," replied Dr. Chen, frowning at the data. "The mountains create unpredictable patterns. Maybe 2 hours, maybe less." Marcus nodded grimly. Sound the alert. Level 2 emergency protocols. I want everyone accounted for and ready to move to the reinforced buildings if necessary. Within minutes, the settlement's alarm began to pulse. 3 short bursts repeated at intervals, signaling a weather emergency. Settlers moved with practiced efficiency, securing equipment and heading to designated shelters. But amidst the controlled chaos, a realization struck Marcus. "Where's Dr. Morgan?" he asked, scanning the crowd gathering in the main research building. "I saw her walking near the western perimeter with Lily about 30 minutes ago," said one of the research assistants. Marcus immediately activated his comm unit. "Eliza, this is Marcus. Do you copy?" The only response was static. The mountains often interfered with communications, especially during atmospheric disturbances. Marcus grabbed his weather gear and headed for the door. "Sir, protocol states you should remain at command during," began his deputy. "I know the protocols," Marcus cut him off. "But Eliza and Lily are out there. Maintain operations here." Outside, the sky had darkened ominously. The wind had picked up considerably, bending the tall grasses and whipping dust into small tornadoes. Marcus headed toward the western perimeter at a run, fighting against the strengthening gusts. Meanwhile, Eliza had indeed heard the alarm, but at a distance that made the specific pattern difficult to discern. She quickened her pace, Lily now fussing in her arms, perhaps sensing her mother's growing anxiety. The wind tore at her jacket, and the first heavy raindrops began to fall, cold and sharp against her skin. The path back to the settlement crossed a shallow streambed that was usually dry except during the heaviest rains. As Eliza approached it, she saw with alarm that water was already beginning to flow through it, gurgling over the stones. The mountain above them was funneling rainwater down at an alarming rate. "It's okay, Lily," she murmured, trying to keep her voice calm as she assessed the crossing. "We're going to get a bit wet, but then we'll be warm and dry back home." She had just stepped into the stream, the water reaching her ankles, when she heard a sound that turned her blood cold, a deep rumbling from further up the mountain. Not thunder, but the sound of earth and rock in motion. A landslide. Kelder had seen it all unfolding, the rapidly deteriorating weather, the human mother's predicament, and now the massive section of saturated mountainside beginning to give way above her position. Dragon Law was clear, but in that moment, something more fundamental than law guided his actions. With a powerful surge of his wings, he launched from his perch and dove toward the valley floor. Wind and rain lashed at his massive form, but he barely noticed as he focused entirely on reaching the human and her child before the wall of mud and debris did. Eliza saw only a blur of motion and color before an enormous shape swept over her. She clutched Lily tightly and crouched instinctively, certain they were about to die. Instead, she felt herself being lifted, a massive clawed foot gently but firmly gripping her around the waist, careful not to harm her or the baby. The sensation of sudden flight was disorienting. Wind and rain whipped around them as they rose rapidly into the air. Lily, surprisingly, did not cry out in fear but made a sound almost like delighted laughter as they soared above the valley. Below them, the landslide crashed through the exact spot where they had stood moments before, carrying trees, boulders, and mud in a destructive path toward the valley floor. The shallow stream transformed instantly into a raging torrent. Eliza, still trying to process what was happening, looked up and found herself staring at the underside of an enormous dragon, coppery scales gleaming despite the storm, powerful wings cutting through the turbulent air with steady rhythm. Her scientific mind registered details even through her shock: the musculature of the wing membranes, the articulation of the joints, the heat radiating from the creature's body. Kelder circled once over the settlement, noting the humans rushing about below, before banking toward a large cave opening partway up the mountain face. He needed to get the humans to shelter, and the settlement's buildings might not withstand the full fury of the storm to come. Inside the cave, Kelder set Eliza gently on the stone floor, releasing his grip. The cave was dry and surprisingly warm, with a high ceiling that accommodated the dragon's massive form. Luminous crystals embedded in the walls provided a soft blue-green light. Eliza backed away immediately, holding Lily protectively against her chest. Her heart pounded wildly as she took in the full sight of the dragon before her. He was enormous, at least 70 feet from snout to tail tip, with a wingspan that could easily shade half the settlement's central plaza. His scales were primarily copper in color, darkening to almost bronze along his spine, with hints of gold at the edges. Ancient eyes regarded her with unmistakable intelligence. You saved us, Eliza said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't expect a response. No human had ever reported a dragon communicating directly with them. Dragon vocalizations had been recorded from a distance, but they were assumed to be territorial calls or communication with other dragons, not language as humans understood it. Kelder remained still, studying the human female and her offspring. He had broken dragon law by interfering and by bringing humans to a dragon sanctuary. The council would be furious. Yet watching the landslide's path, he knew the humans would have perished without his intervention. Some principles transcended the laws of any species. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the cave entrance, followed by thunder that shook small stones loose from the ceiling. Lily, who had been surprisingly calm during their flight, now began to whimper at the loud noise. "Shh, it's okay," Eliza soothed, bouncing the baby gently. "We're safe here." She glanced at the dragon, still uncertain. "We are safe, aren't we?" Kelder understood human speech. All elder dragons did. They had studied human languages for centuries, though humans remained unaware of this fact. He could speak their language too, though no dragon had done so to a human in living memory. To break this final taboo would forever change the relationship between their species. Another crack of thunder, louder than before, sent Lily into full crying. The sound echoed in the cave, piercing and distressed. Eliza tried to comfort her, but the baby was overtired and frightened. Something about the child's cries stirred ancient memories in Kelder of his own offspring, long grown, and the universal nature of a young one's distress. Without conscious decision, he lowered his massive head and began to hum deep in his throat, producing a gentle, resonant tone that seemed to fill the cave with warmth. Remarkably, Lily's cries began to subside. She hiccuped once, twice, then turned her head toward the source of the humming. Her tear-streaked face registered curiosity rather than fear as she looked at the enormous dragon. "She likes your humming," Eliza said, surprised. "She responds the same way to her father's voice when he sings to her." Kelder ceased humming and regarded the child thoughtfully. Young humans were so different from dragon hatchlings, yet in many ways so similar, vulnerable, innocent, uncorrupted by prejudice or fear. This child looked at him not as a monster from legend, but simply as another living being. Lily reached out a tiny hand toward the dragon, opening and closing her fingers in that universal gesture of infant interest. "Bah," she said clearly, then a string of babble that meant nothing yet somehow conveyed everything in its sincerity. Eliza's scientific curiosity began to overcome her fear. "She's trying to communicate with you," she said with wonder. "She's at the age where she's beginning to associate words with people and things." She hesitated, then added, "I'm Eliza. This is Lily." Kelder knew this moment was pivotal. 900 years of dragon custom and law balanced against the simple, honest gesture of a human child reaching out without fear. The council would say he had already gone too far. What difference would one more step make? "She is very small," Kelder said finally, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate from the very stone around them. The ancient dragon language translated imperfectly into human speech, giving his words a formal, almost archaic quality. Eliza gasped, nearly dropping Lily in her shock. You spoke. In English." "I did," Kelder acknowledged, maintaining a respectful distance. "Though it has been forbidden for many centuries." "Forbidden?" Eliza's mind raced with questions. "You mean dragons have been able to speak with us all along?" "We have studied your languages since their inception," Kelder explained. "Knowledge is preserved and passed down through generations. But after the ancient wars, it was decided that separation was the safest path for both our kinds." "Wars?" Eliza's eyes widened. "There's nothing in our historical records about wars with dragons." "Your written history is young," Kelder said simply. "What you call prehistory contains many truths lost to human knowledge." This revelation was staggering, potentially rewriting human understanding of their own past. But before Eliza could ask more questions, Lily let out a delighted squeal and pointed directly at Kelder. "Uncie," she exclaimed clearly. "Uncie." Eliza laughed despite herself. "She's trying to say, uncle. It's what she calls my brother when he visits. She associates deep voices with her uncle." Kelder tilted his massive head slightly, an almost human gesture of curiosity. "Uncle," he repeated. "This is a family designation?" "Yes," Eliza explained. It means my brother, a family member who isn't a parent but is still connected by blood and who cares for her. The dragon was silent for a long moment, contemplating this simple human concept. In dragon society, the raising of hatchlings was a communal responsibility within the clan, but they had no direct equivalent to the human concept of uncle. Uncie, Lily repeated more insistently, still reaching toward the dragon. She wants you to come closer, Eliza said, surprised by her own lack of fear now. Something about the dragon's manner, respectful, thoughtful, almost gentle despite his enormous size and power, had calmed her initial terror. Kelder hesitated, then slowly, with extraordinary care, extended his massive head toward them. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for the child to see him clearly, but not so near as to frighten either human. What happened next would be recorded in both human and dragon histories as the moment everything changed. Lily, with the fearless curiosity of infancy, leaned forward in her mother's arms, hands still outstretched, and touched the dragon's snout. Her tiny fingers brushed against scales that had witnessed centuries of history, that had been hardened in the fires of ancient battles and weathered by countless storms. Uncie, she said again, with the absolute conviction only a child can muster. Something profound shifted in the ancient dragon's heart, a warming he had not felt in centuries. Here was innocence and acceptance in its purest form, untainted by prejudice or fear. The barriers of 900 years seemed suddenly thin and meaningless in the face of such simple truth. Yes, little one, he rumbled softly. You may call me uncle. Outside, the storm continued to rage, reshaping the landscape with its fury. Inside the cave, an equally powerful force was at work, reshaping the relationship between two intelligent species that had shared a planet yet lived apart for millennia. On the valley floor, Marcus Reed fought against the driving rain and wind, having reached the area where Eliza and Lily were last seen. The landslide had carved a destructive path across the landscape, leaving mud and debris in its wake. His heart sank as he surveyed the damage, fear gripping him at the thought of what might have happened to them. His communicator crackled with static. Reed, you need to get back here now, came the urgent voice of his deputy. The second phase of the storm is approaching, and it's worse than we predicted. Marcus ignored the order, continuing to search the muddy terrain for any sign of Eliza and Lily. Then he saw something that made him freeze in place, an enormous footprint pressed into the mud, unlike anything he'd ever seen before. 3 massive clawed toes, each impression deep enough to indicate tremendous weight. A dragon's print. Cold dread washed over him. Dragons had never attacked the settlement or any humans in the region to their knowledge, but there were always stories, legends of dragons carrying off livestock, or worse. I found something, he reported grimly into his communicator. I think a dragon may have taken them. Back in the cave, Eliza was engaged in the most extraordinary conversation of her life. Kelder was explaining aspects of dragon society that no human had ever known, their council structure, their dedication to preserving knowledge, their deeply held beliefs about balance in the natural world. But why choose isolation? Eliza asked. If dragons are as you describe, thoughtful, peaceful and less threatened, why cut off all communication with humans? Kelder's ancient eyes seemed to look beyond her, into a distant past. The decision was not made lightly, nor was it made only by dragons. After the final battle at what you now call the Great Divide, leaders of both species recognized that neither fully understood the other, and that misunderstandings led too easily to bloodshed. The human representatives agreed that humanity was not ready for the knowledge dragons possessed. Human representatives? Who were they? Their names would mean nothing to you now. They belonged to civilizations your archaeologists have barely discovered traces of. But they were wise, and they understood the danger of knowledge without wisdom to guide its use. Lily had fallen asleep in Eliza's arms, exhausted from the day's events. Eliza adjusted her position, trying to keep her daughter comfortable while continuing this once-in-a-lifetime conversation. Something has changed, though, she observed. You broke your laws to save us, and now you're speaking to me. Kelder's massive form shifted slightly. Yes, the world is changing. Humans have expanded further than ever before, developing technologies that increasingly impact the natural balance. Some among the Dragon Council believe the time of isolation must end, that without dialogue, conflict is inevitable as our territories overlap. Others fear that humans are still guided by the same impulses that led to the ancient wars. And what do you believe? Eliza asked. The dragon was silent for a long moment. "I believe that wisdom can be found in unexpected places," he said finally. "Your child called me uncle without fear or prejudice. Perhaps there is hope in such innocence." A distant rumble of thunder reminded them of the storm still raging outside. Kelder rose to his full height, moving toward the cave entrance to assess the conditions. "The storm will continue through the night," he reported. "The path to your settlement is unsafe now, but I can take you there once the rainfall subsides." "Thank you," Eliza said, meaning it for far more than just the offer of transportation. Will you be punished by your council for helping us? For speaking with me?" "It is likely," Kelder acknowledged. "But I have lived long enough to stand by my convictions. Some rules must be broken for better ones to take their place." A sudden noise from the cave entrance drew their attention. Silhouetted against the storm-darkened sky was a human figure, dripping with rain and mud, holding what appeared to be a weapon. "Eliza," Marcus called, his voice tight with tension. "Step away from it." Slowly. "Marcus, no." Eliza stood carefully, still holding the sleeping Lily. "He saved us. He saved us from the landslide." Marcus kept his emergency pulse rifle trained on the dragon, though he knew the weapon would probably do little against such a massive creature. "Just come toward me," he said, his eyes never leaving Kelder. The dragon remained perfectly still, understanding the human male's protective instinct. A wrong move now could undo everything. "Marcus, please listen," Eliza said urgently. "This changes everything we thought we knew. Dragons can speak our language. They have their own civilization, their own history that intertwines with ours in ways we never knew." Marcus's expression showed disbelief, but he didn't lower his weapon. "That's not possible. No recorded contact with dragons has ever." "Uncle," came a small, sleepy voice. Lily had awakened and was looking directly at Kelder, repeating the word that had broken 900 years of silence. "Uncle." The simple word, spoken with such innocent certainty, seemed to hang in the air between them. Marcus's aim wavered slightly. "She called him that on her own," Eliza explained quickly. And he answered. Kelder chose this moment to speak, his deep voice resonating through the cave. "Your concern for their safety is commendable, human guardian. I intend no harm to any of your kind." Marcus nearly dropped his weapon in shock. You can talk?" "I can," Kelder confirmed. "Though by doing so, I break the oldest law of my kind." The security officer lowered his rifle slowly, his training and protocols utterly inadequate for the situation he now faced. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why break your law now?" Kelder's gaze moved from Marcus to the small child in Eliza's arms. "Because sometimes the wisdom of the youngest among us shames the oldest. Your child saw not an ancient enemy but simply another living being, and named me family without hesitation or fear." Outside, the storm began to show signs of weakening, the thunder more distant, the rainfall lighter. But inside the cave, the real storm, one of changing perceptions and collapsing barriers, was just beginning. As dawn broke over Thorn Valley the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Mud and debris from multiple landslides scarred the mountainsides, and the valley floor was littered with fallen trees and rocks. The settlement had weathered the storm with minimal damage thanks to its reinforced structures and early warning systems. But the physical changes to the valley paled in comparison to the transformation about to occur in the relationship between its inhabitants, human and dragon alike. Kelder had returned Eliza, Lily, and Marcus to the settlement as the storm cleared, landing briefly at its outskirts before departing with a promise to return in 3 days' time. His appearance had caused predictable shock and alarm among the settlers, tempered only by Marcus's firm orders not to react with hostility and Eliza's passionate explanation of what had occurred. Now, as the settlement's leadership convened an emergency meeting, the implications of first contact with an intelligent, speaking dragon were beginning to sink in. Historical paradigms were shifting, scientific understanding was being rewritten, and diplomatic protocols that had never been imagined were suddenly urgently needed. "This changes everything," said Administrator Chen, the settlement's civilian leader, voicing what everyone in the room was thinking. "Everything we thought we knew about dragons, about our own history." Eliza nodded, still processing her own experiences. "And he said he's just one elder. There's an entire dragon society with its own governance structure, its own knowledge systems." Marcus, who had spent the night drafting and redrafting his official report to Commonwealth headquarters, looked grim. The question is, what happens now? This is beyond any first contact protocol we have. In her mother's lap, Lily babbled happily, occasionally looking toward the mountains and saying clearly, "Uncle." For her, the situation was simple. For everyone else, the complexity was just beginning to unfold. High above Thorn Valley, Kelder soared through the morning sky, his massive wings catching the thermal currents rising from the sun-warmed earth below. His mind was troubled, conflicted between the certainty that he had done what was right and the knowledge that he had irrevocably violated dragon law. The council would be gathering soon, summoned by the sentinels who had undoubtedly observed his interaction with the humans. 900 years of tradition and separation were now in jeopardy because of his actions. Yet he could not bring himself to regret what he had done. The image of the human child reaching for him without fear, calling him uncle with such innocent conviction, had awakened something long dormant within him, a hope that perhaps the ancient division between their species need not be eternal. Kelder banked toward the highest peaks, where the entrance to the great cavern lay hidden from human detection by sophisticated illusions that dragons had maintained for millennia. As he approached, he saw two guardian dragons flanking the entrance, Varric and Selenes, both younger than him but respected warriors of the Dragon Guard. Elder Kelder, Varric greeted him formally, though disapproval was evident in his tone. "The council awaits." Kelder nodded in acknowledgement. He had expected nothing less. News traveled quickly among dragons, their telepathic abilities allowing for rapid communication across great distances. The Great Council would have known of his transgression almost immediately. The Great Cavern was a marvel that no human had ever seen, a vast underground space large enough to accommodate hundreds of dragons, with soaring ceilings studded with luminous crystals that provided light and energy. Elaborate murals depicting dragon history covered the walls, including scenes from the ancient dragon-human wars that had been expunged from human historical records. As Kelder entered, he saw that all 7 members of the Council of Elders were present, arranged in a semicircle on raised stone platforms. At the center sat Morvith, oldest of all living dragons at nearly 1,500 years, his scales faded to a pale silver with age. "Kelder," Morvith's voice resonated through the cavern, silencing the murmurs of the dozen or so other dragons who had gathered to witness the proceedings. "You have broken our most sacred law. You have not only interfered directly in human affairs but have spoken to them in their tongue and revealed secrets kept for millennia." "I have," Kelder acknowledged, standing tall before the council. There was no point in denial or evasion. "Explain yourself," demanded Thalarian, a younger council member known for his strict adherence to tradition. What could possibly justify such a breach? Kelder gathered his thoughts carefully. What had seemed so clear in the moment, saving an innocent life, responding to a child's guileless acceptance, now had to be articulated as a reasoned defense before the collected wisdom of dragonkind. "I acted first to prevent death," he began. "A mother and child would have perished in the landslide had I not intervened. This alone violates no law. Our code permits observation and even indirect assistance that does not reveal our true nature. Yet you went far beyond this," noted Lyria, the only female elder on the council. "You brought humans to a dragon sanctuary. You spoke to them directly. You confirmed our knowledge of their languages and revealed aspects of our history." "I did," Kelder admitted, "and I stand by that choice, though I know it defies our ancient decrees." He paused, gathering the full attention of every dragon present before continuing. "For 9 centuries, we have lived apart from humans, observing as they spread across the lands, developed new technologies, fought their wars, and built their civilizations. We have maintained our isolation based on the belief that humans are unchanged from those we encountered in the ancient times, driven by fear, greed, and a desire to dominate rather than coexist." Murmurs rippled through the assembled dragons, but Kelder pressed on. "I have watched humans for all of my 900 years. I have seen their cruelty, yes, but also their capacity for growth, for compassion, for change. The humans who have settled in Thorn Valley are not conquerors or exploiters but seekers of knowledge, students of the natural world." "All the more dangerous," interrupted Thalarian. "Knowledge seekers who would covet the secrets of dragonkind if given the chance." "Perhaps," Kelder conceded. "But consider this, their child, barely able to speak, looked upon me not with fear but with acceptance. She called me uncle, a designation of family, of trust. There was no guile there, no ulterior motive, simply pure acceptance of another being." Children grow into adults, Morvith said gravely, and innocence gives way to the complexities of adult motivation. True, said Kelder. But what if the division between our kinds is not inevitable? What if isolation has served its purpose and now hampers us from finding a new way forward? The world changes. Humans expand ever closer to our territories. Conflict becomes more likely with each passing decade unless we establish communication. The council chamber fell silent as the elders considered his words. Finally, Morvith spoke again. You have acted on personal conviction rather than collective wisdom, Kelder. This cannot go unanswered. Yet your points merit consideration. The ancient dragon turned to his fellow council members. I propose we observe these particular humans further before rendering final judgment. Kelder, you will remain here while we send others to watch the settlement. With respect, Elder Morvith, Kelder said firmly, I gave my word to return to them in 3 days' time. Shock rippled through the chamber at this additional revelation. You made promises to humans? Thalarian was aghast. Without council authority? I did, Kelder said simply. And I intend to honor that promise. Such defiance. Thalarian's tail lashed in agitation. This goes beyond a momentary lapse in judgment to willful rejection of our loss. Morvith raised a wing for silence. Enough. Kelder, you are confined to the sanctuary until the council reaches a decision. Guards will ensure you do not leave. Kelder bowed his head in acknowledgement of the order, though inside he felt a deep disquiet. He had given his word to return, and a dragon's word, once given, was sacred. The council was placing him in an impossible position, forcing him to choose between the laws of his kind and his personal honor. As he was escorted from the chamber by 4 guardian dragons, Kelder's thoughts returned to the human child who had reached for him without fear. Sometimes, he reflected, the simplest truths were spoken by those with the fewest words. Back in Thorn Valley, the human settlement was in a state of controlled chaos. News of the dragon encounter had spread rapidly, and the Commonwealth's Central Authority had dispatched a special diplomatic team that was due to arrive within 48 hours. Scientists were reviewing all dragon research in light of the new revelations, and security protocols were being hurriedly revised. In the midst of this activity, Eliza found herself both celebrated as the first human to engage in meaningful communication with a dragon and bombarded with endless debriefings and questions. She sat now in her small laboratory, attempting to transcribe everything she could remember from her conversation with Kelder while Lily played contentedly in a secure corner of the room. Dr. Morgan? A knock at the door interrupted her work. It was Administrator Chen, looking harried. The advanced team from Central is requesting another call with you. They're particularly interested in the dragon's mention of ancient wars between our species. Eliza sighed, rubbing her temples. Tell them I'll call in 20 minutes. I need to finish this while my memory is fresh. As Chen left, Eliza glanced over at Lily, who was stacking colored blocks with focused determination. Every so often, the child would look up toward the window facing the mountains and say clearly, Uncle. Yes, sweetheart, Eliza would respond each time. Uncle Kelder said he'll come back to visit. She wondered if the dragon would indeed return as promised. So much depended on it, not just the scientific and diplomatic implications, but also, strangely, a sense of personal connection that had formed in that cave during the storm. Kelder had not simply been an object of study or a diplomatic counterpart, but a thinking, feeling being with his own complex history and perspective. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparations. Commonwealth officials established a secure perimeter around the landing area where they anticipated Kelder might return. Scientific teams set up advanced recording equipment to document every aspect of the dragon's physiology and vocalizations. Diplomatic experts drafted potential communication protocols and first contact statements. Through it all, Eliza felt increasingly uncomfortable with the military presence that had accompanied the diplomatic team, troops armed with experimental high-energy weapons supposedly designed for planetary defense, but clearly being positioned with Kelder's arrival in mind. This isn't right, she argued with Director Harlow, the Commonwealth's lead representative. He came in peace. He saved my daughter's life. Greeting him with weapons will only confirm the fears his people have about us. These are precautionary measures only, Harlow assured her smoothly. Standard protocol for any first contact scenario with a potentially dangerous species. He's not just a species, Eliza insisted. He's an individual with 900 years of wisdom and his own moral code. He broke his people's laws to help us. We should respect that courage, not prepare to attack him. But her protests fell on deaf ears. The Commonwealth saw an opportunity for accessing dragon knowledge, technology, history, perhaps even the biological secrets of their longevity, and they were not about to risk losing this chance by appearing vulnerable. On the morning of the third day, a tense anticipation gripped the settlement. Everyone watched the skies, expecting at any moment to see the copper-scaled form of Keldo appearing above the mountains. Eliza kept Lily close, hoping the child's presence might help maintain the fragile connection that had been established. Noon came and went with no sign of the dragon. Then afternoon. As the sun began to lower toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, murmurs of disappointment and suspicion began to circulate among the Commonwealth officials. Perhaps it was a one-time aberration, suggested one scientist, or a test to gauge our reactions. More likely they've reconsidered the wisdom of contact, said Director Harlow. If they're as advanced and organized as Dr. Morgan suggests, they would have protocols of their own to prevent unauthorized disclosure. Eliza said nothing, but a sense of profound disappointment settled over her. Had Kelder's people forbidden his return? Or worse, punished him for the contact he had already made? As twilight deepened into evening, most of the observation teams were recalled to the settlement for debriefing and to plan the next day's operations. Only a skeleton crew remained at the perimeter, maintaining watch more out of procedure than expectation now. Eliza put Lily to bed in their small housing unit, the baby fussing more than usual, repeatedly saying uncle and pointing toward the window. I know, sweetheart, Eliza soothed. I miss him too. Maybe tomorrow. She had just gotten Lily to sleep when an urgent knock came at her door. It was Marcus, his expression tense. Perimeter sensors have detected movement on the eastern ridge, he said in a low voice. Something large, moving fast, but not following the flight pattern we expected based on Kelder's previous approach. Another dragon? Eliza's heart raced. Is it coming toward the settlement? Unclear. It's maintaining distance, circling the region. The director has ordered full alert status. Eliza grabbed her jacket. I'm coming with you. The director specifically said. I don't care what the director said. I'm the only human who's had a real conversation with a dragon. If this is Kelder or another of his kind, I should be there. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Stay close to me. And we need someone to watch Lily. I'll call Chin. She's good with her. 10 minutes later, they were in a transport vehicle heading toward the eastern observation post. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in the mountain sky, making it difficult to spot a dark shape moving against the blackness. There, said the sensor operator as they arrived, pointing to a readout on her screen. Thermal signature consistent with dragon physiology, based on the limited data we have from your encounter. But it's smaller than your description of Kelder, and the flight pattern is different, more erratic. Eliza peered into the darkness, trying to spot any movement. Can we signal somehow? Let them know we're open to communication. The director hasn't authorized any, began the operator, but she was cut off by a sudden alert from her equipment. It's changing course. Coming directly toward us. Defensive positions, ordered the security team leader, and soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, weapons at the ready. No, Eliza protested. Don't threaten it. But her words were lost in the sudden rush of activity. Powerful spotlights activated, sweeping the sky in search of the approaching dragon. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness. Then a shape swept into view, smaller than Kelder but unmistakably draconic, scales gleaming a deep blue-black in the artificial light. The dragon circled once, clearly visible now, then landed about 200 yards from the perimeter, well outside the defensive line but close enough for communication. Unlike Kelder's copper coloration, this dragon was primarily midnight blue with silver accents along its wings and crest. Hold fire, ordered Marcus firmly, overriding the nervous trigger fingers of the Commonwealth troops. Dr. Morgan, stay behind the line. But Eliza was already moving forward, stopping at the perimeter boundary but making herself clearly visible. The dragon regarded her with intelligent eyes that gleamed like polished amber in the spotlights. It was indeed smaller than Kelder, perhaps 50 feet from snout to tail tip rather than 70, and its build was more slender, suggesting greater speed if less raw power. For a long moment, dragon and human regarded each other in silence. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, the dragon spoke, its voice higher and more melodic than Kelder's deep rumble but equally clear. "I am Lyria of the Council of Elders," she announced. "I come seeking understanding of what transpired between Elder Kelder and the humans of this settlement." Murmurs of shock rippled through the human observers. A second speaking dragon, and one identifying itself as a council member. Eliza stepped forward. "I am Dr. Eliza Morgan. I spoke with Kelder during the storm. He saved my life and my daughter's when a landslide would have killed us." Lyria's head tilted slightly. "So he reported to our council. Where's the young one who named him, Uncle?" "She's sleeping. Her name is Lily." The dragon seemed to consider this. "Kelder has been forbidden by our council from returning to you. His actions violated our oldest laws." Disappointment washed through Eliza, though she had half expected this. "I understand. But I hope you'll convey our gratitude for what he did, and our respect for his wisdom and compassion." "You speak as if you know him well after a single encounter," Lyria observed. "Sometimes a single honest conversation reveals more than years of distant observation," Eliza replied. The dragon made a sound that might almost have been a chuckle. He said something similar when defending his actions to the council. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the assembled humans and the weapons they carried. "He also said you were not motivated by conquest or exploitation but by a desire for knowledge and understanding. Yet I see weapons aimed in my direction." Director Harlow stepped forward, attempting to take control of the interaction. "Standard security protocols for any unknown." "I was not addressing you," Lyria cut him off, her attention remaining fixed on Eliza. "I asked for the perspective of the one who spoke with Kelder." "The weapons are unnecessary and counterproductive," Eliza said firmly. "They're here despite my objections, not because of them." Lyria nodded slowly. "Divided opinions among your kind, just as among mine. The Council of Elders is split on how to proceed following Kelder's actions. Some advocate for reaffirming our isolation, perhaps even relocating our sanctuary away from human settlements. Others suggest that 9 centuries of separation have served their purpose, and a new approach may be needed." "And what do you believe?" Eliza asked, echoing the question she had posed to Kelder in the cave. "I believe in wisdom wherever it may be found," Lyria replied. "Even from the mouths of the very young." She seemed to come to a decision. "Kelder remains confined by order of the council. But I find myself curious about this human child who saw beyond ancient divisions. Would you bring her to this place when the sun rises tomorrow?" The request sent ripples of reaction through the assembled humans: excitement, caution, strategic calculation. "I will," Eliza promised before anyone could object. "Until tomorrow, then." With a powerful surge of her wings, Lyria launched into the night sky, quickly disappearing into darkness. The moment she was gone, chaos erupted among the humans. Director Harlow was furious that Eliza had made commitments without authorization. Security teams debated the potential threats. Scientists lamented the lost opportunity to gather more data. "Enough," Marcus finally shouted, restoring order. "What's done is done. We have until morning to prepare for another contact, this time with a clear appointment rather than speculation. Let's focus on making it productive and safe for all involved." The night passed in a flurry of preparation and debate. Eliza refused to allow Lily to be treated as a research subject or diplomatic pawn, insisting that the child's welfare and comfort would be her priority during any meeting. After hours of argument, a compromise was reached. Eliza would bring Lily to the meeting point, but the child would remain primarily in her mother's arms, interacting with the dragon only if she showed natural inclination to do so, and never beyond Eliza's immediate reach. Dawn broke clear and cold over the mountains. Eliza dressed Lily warmly and carried her to the meeting point, surrounded by a minimal security team that she had personally approved, Marcus and 2 others who had demonstrated level-headedness during previous operations. The director and other officials would observe from a greater distance, their presence minimized to avoid creating an atmosphere of confrontation. As the sun cleared the eastern peaks, a now familiar shape appeared in the sky: Lyria, her blue-black scales gleaming in the morning light. She landed with grace at approximately the same distance as before, regarding the much smaller human contingent with what seemed like approval. "You have come as promised," the dragon observed. "And you have brought fewer guards. This shows wisdom." "Trust must begin somewhere," Eliza replied. "This is my daughter, Lily." The baby, fully awake and alert in the cool morning air, studied the dragon with bright curiosity. Unlike the adults, who could not help but see Lyria as an imposing and potentially dangerous being, Lily showed no fear, only interest in this new, colorful presence. "Uncie?" she asked, looking around as if expecting Kelda to appear as well. "No, little one," Lyria said gently. "I am not your uncle. I am Lyria." Lily considered this, then pointed directly at the dragon. "Lya," she attempted, simplifying the name to something she could pronounce. The dragon's eyes widened slightly, and she lowered her head to peer more closely at the child. "She learns quickly for one so young. All human children do," Eliza explained. "Their brains are designed for rapid language acquisition in the early years. It's one of our species' advantages." "Fascinating," Lyria murmured. "Our hatchlings develop different capacities first, flight, then fire production, with complex language coming later in development." This casual sharing of dragon biology would have sent the scientific observation teams into ecstasies had they been close enough to hear it. As it was, Eliza found herself in the extraordinary position of engaging in comparative developmental biology with a creature out of legend. "Lya," Lily said again, more insistently, reaching out toward the dragon just as she had toward Kelder. "She wants to touch you," Eliza explained. "But only if you're comfortable with that." The dragon hesitated, then slowly extended her snout toward them, stopping within reach of the child's small hand. With the same fearless curiosity she had shown with Kelder, Lily placed her palm against the dragon's scales, making a sound of delight at the texture. "Soft," the baby declared, though the scales were anything but soft to adult perception. "Smooth, yes, but hard as tempered steel." "Your perception is different from your mother's," Lyria observed, seeming to understand that the child experienced the world uniquely. "You see with new eyes." Something in this interaction seemed to affect the dragon deeply. She drew back slightly, her gaze moving from Lily to Eliza with new intensity. "I begin to understand Kelder's actions," she said. "There is something disarming about a being who holds no preconceptions, no inherited fears or biases. She sees me simply as I am." "Children often see truth that adults miss," Eliza agreed. "It's why we value them so highly, not just as our future, but as our teachers in the present." Lyria was silent for a long moment, clearly deep in thought. Finally, she said, "I must return to the council. What I have witnessed here requires reconsideration of many things." "Will Kelder be punished for helping us?" Eliza couldn't help asking. "That remains to be determined," Lyria replied. "But I will speak on his behalf with new conviction." With that, she launched skyward again, circling once overhead before disappearing beyond the mountain ridges. For 3 days, there was no further contact from the dragons. Commonwealth officials began to lose patience, talking of more proactive measures to establish communication, suggestions that made Eliza increasingly uncomfortable. She knew that pushing too hard or too fast could destroy the fragile connection that had begun to form. On the morning of the 4th day, Eliza was walking with Lily near the settlement's edge, the baby practicing her newfound walking skills by taking unsteady steps while holding her mother's fingers, when a shadow passed overhead. Looking up, Eliza's heart leapt at the sight of a massive copper-scaled form descending toward them. Kelder landed at a respectful distance, his ancient eyes finding Eliza's immediately. But he was not alone. Behind him, arrayed in a semicircle at the base of the mountain, were 6 other dragons of varying sizes and colors, one of them the now familiar blue-black form of Lyria. "Kelder," Eliza breathed. "You came back." "Uncie?" Lily squealed in delight, abandoning her walking practice to reach toward the dragon with both arms. "Yes, little one," the ancient dragon rumbled, his voice warm with affection. "Your uncle has returned, and I have brought others who wish to meet you." Eliza stared in wonder at the assembled dragons, 7 in total, their scales representing a spectrum of colors from Kelder's burnished copper to deep forest green, obsidian black, silver white, and more. "The Council of Elders," Kelder explained, seeing her amazement. "They have come to witness what I described and to make their own judgments." Alarms were already sounding in the settlement behind them as sensors detected the multiple massive life forms. Eliza knew they had perhaps minutes before security teams arrived, potentially disrupting this historic moment with displays of force. Lily recognized her name. She told Lyria quickly, gesturing to the blue-black dragon. "She's been practicing saying it." "Lya," Lily confirmed, pointing directly at the female elder. Something like pleasure seemed to flicker in the dragon's expression. "She remembers." Remarkable. The oldest-looking dragon, scales faded to silver with age, stepped forward slightly. I am Morvith, first elder of the Dragon Council, he announced, his voice even deeper than Kelder's and carrying the weight of centuries. For 1,500 years I have lived, and never did I expect to address humans directly in their tongue. Eliza bowed respectfully, still holding Lily's hand. We are honored by your presence, First Elder. The honor, Morvith said with surprising humility, may be ours. Kelder and Lyria have spoken eloquently of what they witnessed here, a human child who looks upon dragonkind without fear or prejudice, who reaches across divisions established before her ancestors were born. Behind them, vehicles were approaching rapidly from the settlement. Eliza turned and held up her hand in a clear signal to stop, relieved when Marcus, who was leading the response team, acknowledged her gesture and halted the convoy at a distance. Our council has deliberated at length, Morvith continued. Some argued that 9 centuries of isolation should not end because of a single encounter, no matter how remarkable. Others suggested that time and circumstances have changed both our kinds, creating possibilities that did not exist before. And what conclusion did you reach? Eliza asked, hardly daring to breathe. The ancient dragon's gaze moved from Eliza to Lily, who was watching him with unabashed fascination. We have decided that isolation has served its purpose. A new chapter must begin cautiously, gradually, but begin it must. Relief and joy flooded through Eliza. Thank you, she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate for the magnitude of the moment. Do not thank us yet, warned another elder, a forest-green dragon with intelligent eyes. The path ahead will not be easy. Centuries of separation cannot be bridged in a day or a year. There will be misunderstandings, setbacks, perhaps even conflicts. But there will also be discovery, added Lyria. Exchange of knowledge, of perspectives, of wisdom accumulated separately but now to be shared. And it begins with a child's simple acceptance, Kelder said, lowering his massive head to Lily's level. Hello again, little one. Your uncle has missed you. Lily reached out fearlessly, placing both hands on his snout. Uncie, she said with absolute conviction, then added a new word that made Eliza's eyes widen in surprise. Stay. The ancient dragon made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. Not always, little one. But I will return. We all will. As if on cue, Director Harlow's voice came over a loudspeaker from the convoy. Dr. Morgan, please confirm your status. Are you and Lily safe? Eliza turned toward the human delegation, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. We're perfectly safe, she called back. And we're making history. The Dragon Council has come to establish formal communication with humanity. The reaction from the convoy was predictable, a mixture of shock, excitement, and frantic communication with Commonwealth headquarters. But Eliza's attention remained focused on the extraordinary gathering before her. There will be protocols to establish, Morvith said. Boundaries to define. Knowledge to be shared selectively as trust develops. We understand, Eliza assured him. We'll need time as well, to prepare our people, to develop frameworks for interaction that respect both our cultures. Kelder nodded approvingly. Wisdom indeed. Not rushing headlong into new territories, but proceeding with careful steps. Uncie, Lily said again, tugging at Eliza's hand and pointing at Kelder, then at the settlement. Home. The simple invitation to bring a dragon into a human dwelling illustrated both the innocence of a child's perspective and the complexity of the path ahead. Boundaries that adults recognized instantly were non-existent to Lily, who saw only a trusted friend she wanted to welcome into her home. Perhaps someday, little one, Kelda told her gently, when our peoples know each other better. Morvith raised his head, addressing both the humans who had now cautiously approached and his fellow dragons. Let it be recorded in the histories of both our kinds. On this day, the great silence ended. And it ended not with war or threat, not with formal diplomacy or strategic calculation, but because a child saw with clear eyes and spoke with an honest heart. The dragons took to the sky shortly thereafter, rising in a spectacular display of coordinated flight that left the humans watching in awe. They circled once over the settlement before disappearing beyond the mountain peaks, their departure marking not an ending but a beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, protocols were indeed established. Designated meeting areas were created halfway between the settlement and the dragon sanctuary. Knowledge was exchanged cautiously at first, then with growing openness as trust developed. Humans learned of their forgotten history, of civilizations lost to time that had once interacted with dragonkind. Dragons learned of human resilience, creativity, and the rapid cultural evolution that their longer-lived species sometimes struggled to comprehend. Not everyone on either side welcomed the new relationship. Some humans feared dragon power or coveted it for military applications. Some dragons viewed renewed contact as a dangerous mistake that would eventually lead to conflict. But the momentum toward cooperation proved stronger than the forces of suspicion and fear. 6 months after the first contact, Thorn Valley had been transformed. Now formally designated as the primary dragon-human liaison point, it had grown from a small research outpost to a thriving settlement with diplomatic facilities, cultural exchange centers, and joint research initiatives. Scholars, scientists, and diplomats from across human territories came to learn and contribute. Throughout it all, Kelder visited regularly, forming a special bond with Lily that became symbolic of the new relationship between their species. The child who had named him Uncle grew from babbling infant to talking toddler, her vocabulary expanding rapidly but her complete acceptance of dragonkind remaining unchanged. On a clear autumn day, Eliza sat with Lily on a specially constructed observation platform overlooking the valley. Kelder was expected to visit, and the child could hardly contain her excitement. "When's Uncle coming?" she asked for the dozenth time, her vocabulary now advanced enough for complete sentences. "Soon, sweetheart," Eliza assured her, marveling at how ordinary it had become to refer to an ancient dragon as her daughter's uncle. A shadow passed overhead, and Lily jumped up, pointing skyward with delight. "There he is." Kelder landed gracefully on the large platform designed to accommodate his massive form. "Greetings, young scholar," he rumbled affectionately. It was his special name for Lily, acknowledging her insatiable curiosity. "Uncle." She ran to him fearlessly, placing her small hand against his scales in their customary greeting. "I learned new words today." "Did you indeed?" The dragon settled himself comfortably. "Then you must teach them to me." As Eliza watched them interact, the tiny human child and the ancient dragon engaged in earnest conversation, she reflected on the power of innocence to change the world. Lily had not known that dragons and humans were supposed to be separated by centuries of mistrust and isolation. She had simply seen another living being and reached out in friendship. Sometimes, Eliza thought, the youngest among us were the wisest of all. In dragon society, a new tradition began, one that honored the young human who had broken the great silence with a simple word of recognition and acceptance. Hatchlings were taught that wisdom could come from unexpected sources, and that seeing with unclouded eyes sometimes meant looking through the perspective of those very different from oneself. In human society, the story spread far beyond Thorn Valley, the tale of a baby who called a dragon uncle and changed the course of history. It became a symbol of how barriers between different peoples could be overcome, how ancient divisions could heal through simple recognition of shared intelligence and feeling. And high in the mountains, in the chamber where the Dragon Council met, a new mural was added to the ancient walls, depicting a small human child reaching out to touch the snout of a copper-scaled dragon. Beneath it, in both dragon script and human language, were inscribed the words that had broken 900 years of silence. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from those with the fewest words. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments. Whether positive or negative, your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug and see you in the next story.